experience, I know that Lopenda is not only a academician, scholar, somebody who is doing so much for the society, but also a practitioner and deeply understands Buddhism. And so I'd like to request Lopenda to make an aspiration so that even the young people here today understand. And if you could also, I would really like to start off why aspiration and prayers are important. If you could start off with, we'd like to start this talk, Life as Art Talk series, with this aspiration from you.
Yes. So as we begin, in a very traditional Bhutanese Buddhist fashion, we cultivate an altruistic intention that whatever we do in life, including this session, may bring great benefit to both oneself and others. May this session and everything we do in life bring benefit to both oneself and others. And I'll chant a prayer wishing for auspiciousness through the power and blessings of Manjushri, the Buddha of Wisdom, and Padmasambhava, who we can call the patron saint of Bhutan, in a form that combines the two, asking for tashi, for auspiciousness. And these two in unity also represents the wisdom, compassion, and the power of all the Buddhas of 3 times and 10 directions. So, Chodhu Jawa Kyungi Yishigo, Loden Zope Sange, Pemake, Chambi Yishigo, so on. Tashi, Dubra Jingelo, Tasha, think there is Jawa Sumbala, Gigan, Yawa, Sewa Kyujine, to the Pepe, someday Yishin to Tashi, Dele, Penzum Sobara, Show.
First, go back to your, really back to your childhood days, and to your nomad days. And if you could, because when we talk about art, I think it's so much with nature. And I see that you were a herder. You took care of cattle, sheep. And so, what was it that stays with you?
Yes. So, thank you, Chimi. Yeah, I remember my young days with great nostalgia, and I think a great deal of my personality and worldview has been shaped when I was very young. I was lucky to be born in a family that combined both religion and farming, as is the case with many other families in Bhutan. And I had a literate father, a father who knew how to read and write and appreciated education. So all of our 4 siblings were sent to school. Yes. So we didn't quite have the experience of being a full-time herder.
Yes.
But then during school vacations, we would be often going to warmer regions where we kept our family cows. Yeah. And there was a cow herder with whom we would stay, and sometimes my dad would join us. So it was a pleasant experience being with the cows. But I think the more intimate relationship on a more regular basis was with the horses at home, because we were almost always there with the horses who were kept at home, whereas the big herd of cows you kept up in the mountains, in the pastures, and then in winter they moved to a lower place in Phuntsho district. So it was 2 days hike to even get there. So we had quite a lot of animals to look after, and there were zoos which we used for plowing.
Yes.
And they were always kept at home. Sheep, I don't remember looking after the flock, but again we let some neighbors look after our flock with their flock. So I didn't really have time looking after the flock of sheep. One of the things that has impacted me, and a kind of a value that came out of our very close relationship with the animals at home, is this view, especially shared and articulated by my mother, who would say, I'm the mother who gave birth to you, but these cows and the animals are the mothers who bring you up, because the family's livelihood was primarily based on what they produced,
Yes.
like the butter and cheese from the cows, what the horses did in terms of transporting things, the wool that we got from our family flock. So she would say, these animals are your mothers who are your foster mothers, basically, mothers who brought you up.
Yes.
And that kind of worldview, that kind of approach and attitude towards your domestic animals really shapes your interaction with animals in later phases of life. So I think growing up with farm animals definitely helped have a much more conducive, easier to appreciate animals, talk about maybe animal rights, avoid cruelty towards animals, or I'm a vegetarian now for almost 3 decades.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure a lot of these values that were passed down to me when I was young made me
Yes.
live a life that I live today.
Seed
Life.
smaller, like
Yes, yes.
it's a seed which we actually already have. All
Yes, indeed.
human beings, all of us, we
Yes.
have that inside of us, and being able to. We're very fortunate that you were there in that setting those days, and I also see that your work. You grapple. I think you've grappled, but just not grappled, but you've acted on it to actually see that there's a big disconnect because of Bhutan had no option but to open our doors, and this is where I think you not only grapple with the disconnect that's going to happen with a lot of our younger generation, and that's where you stepped in, didn't know how and where the funding will come from, but that inherently the will to do something about it and act on it, and it came from compassion. So you started the Loden Foundation. I hear that the Loden Foundation was actually started when you were a student in Oxford with a friend who was working there, college porter Mula, and he gave a €50.
Yes, 50 pounds.
50 pounds, 50 pounds, yes. And you've been able to educate a little girl. And it started from there. It doesn't need much, but it's an intention and a will. And it would be lovely if you would be able to share this story further to the viewers.
Yeah, no, I suppose every human being, every sentient being has the innate goodness, the innate Buddha nature. Now, we are all good and positive by nature. But of course, that nature is obscured by a lot of temporary defilement. So some people have that nature more expressed, others have that nature totally hidden. So that is the only difference. And in case of people like us here in Bhutan, we are so fortunate to be in a setting, in a society where there are so many conditions to help us unravel that inner Buddha nature in us. So upbringing, certainly, the connection to nature and animals, but also our Buddhist connection, upbringing, how we are always taught to be non-selfish, non-self being a very central, very fundamental Buddhist concept. Arrogance and selfishness, egocentricity being always looked down as a total mistake. So these kind of upbringings really help you. And I suppose it is thanks to such upbringing and the educational exposure I got initially in schools in Bhutan, then mostly in the monasteries, Buddhist education that is heavily laden or filled with teachings on compassion, teachings on morality, teachings on altruism and so forth. So those certainly, I would say, helped me be more tuned to civil society or charitable works. But then there has to be always a trigger, right? Yeah. And I think that trigger happened just as I was finishing my education and ready to engage in the world. And I met this college porter. Now, a college porter in Oxford is somebody who is a receptionist and a security guide combined in one. And he was a former policeman, very tall, with a huge sort of bodily structure. I was at that time a very thin monk, and we became friends. And he shared that he couldn't finish school because of financial background. He was born right after the Second World War, so England was also struggling after the war. He came from a poor family, spent most of his young days working on a boat as a cabin boy, and he regretted not being able to finish school. So he said, Karma, if there's someone who cannot finish school because of poor financial background, I don't have a big salary, but I can afford to spare £50 a year. So I was already thinking of doing something in return to society, or to especially Bhutan, because for good 31 years by then, actually it was 30 years then, I went to Oxford in 29, started doing this work at the age of 30.
You were there for in the UK for 14 years, right?
Yes, so I started in 97 and properly met him in 98. And I was already wanting to do something, because I've been so fortunate to be, I suppose, fortuitously in the right place at the right time, we could put it that way, because I was a very stubborn child. I did my school mostly in my village, Ura, and then in Jakar, in the main town of Pumdang. And when the government sent me to eastern Bhutan, for some reason I decided I'm going to go to Thimphu, the capital town. I was so stubborn, I went against the advices of all my relatives and siblings and parents, came to Thimphu, joined YHS here, and then got disillusioned with this school. So after 3 months, I again left school without even informing my parents. And then 9 months in Cherry, again I was so stubborn to get a better education. I ran away from Bhutan to India. So all my life...
You ran away? That part I didn't know, ran away.
A very stubborn child. But then luckily all these big changes I made, or the steps I took, coming from Pumdang to Thimphu for no good reason. In fact, a lot of people discouraged me from going to Thimphu. They would have liked me to go to Chimi in Kaling, which was the top school then. Then becoming a monk without consulting even my parents.
Quite the rebel member.
Yeah. I was not a rebel as such, I would think, but then
just wanted to.
I knew,
very curious.
There was something in me which sort of drove me towards a certain direction. You could call it a karmic wind.
Yes.
Anyway, so I was so lucky to get the best Buddhist education in India. And then again, with all that dogged determination, I managed to get to Oxford with a partial scholarship. So when I looked back on my life, 30 years of my life, I was lucky to be always getting the opportunities, partly through my own stubbornness, but partly also because I think society was at its level, at a stage where such opportunities were becoming available. So I wanted to do something, and meeting Mr. Miles, that was the trigger. So I met him, he expressed his intention to help with £50, and so I brought those £50 with me when I came to Bhutan in 1999. Went to my village and asked the headmaster what we could do with the £50, and he said, our school cook has a very small salary, but 7 daughters.
Yes.
So we funded one of the daughters, who was 6 years old then. And then when I went back to the UK and shared this with other friends, they also wanted to chip in. Because £50, after all, is like saving one coffee a week.
Yes.
So that's how we started. And then we had to formalize the activity. So what we did, we had a registered status to do this work in the UK. And then I had Shejun, who was based in Pumdang at that time, to distribute the money to deserving candidates. So it was a very small initiative at that time of helping poor children go to school, just giving the No, as you know, tuition is free here.
Yes.
So we were basically providing 50 to 100 pounds to buy uniforms, shoes, stationery, sometimes travel expenses. So yeah, I would say meeting Rob Miles was the trigger, although it was already building up because of my own upbringing and education that largely is thanks to Bhutan.
Yes. Then, but you had your monastic studies also in India, Mula?
Yes, yes.
For 10 years.
I studied for 9 years because it takes 9 years to finish your program there. But then before going to the Ngajur Nyingma Institute, which is the Center of Excellence for Nyingma tradition,
Yes.
And the largest Nyingma college in the world even now. And at that time, it was the most outstanding, the obvious choice for anyone to go and do Nyingma Buddhist studies. But I couldn't get there on time, so I went to Sera, which is one of the 3 major Gelugpa monasteries. So I spent 1 year in Sera, then came back to the Nyingma monastery and started the course there. But halfway through my course, firstly, if you're a well-performing student, you become an assistant lecturer called Chorpen. I was an assistant lecturer, but even before getting the position of assistant lecturer, I was already doing a lot of teaching on the sides. And then my teacher, Guru Rinpoche, decided that I should go and run a nunnery. So I ran a nunnery in Dharamsala for 1.5 years.
Yes.
But at the same time, I would always try to do my studies, go back and sit the exams, so I didn't get left behind.
Yes.
And once I graduated from the Shedra, from this institute, I was again kept there as a lecturer for 1 year.
Okay.
So altogether it was 11 years.
11 years. And then, because it's very rare also for somebody to get a monastic, like be thirsty for the monastic kind of studies, but at the same time, again have clarity and courage to go somewhere across the ocean and be in a new place and do Oriental studies again. And why did you feel the necessity for that?
No, one very clear reason is I'm interested in learning. I think I'm definitely above average in terms of curiosity and interest to learn. But then there were also other factors. One factor which I may share if you allow, because it's relevant to Bhutan. You know, when I went to school in the early 70s, secular modern education was quite new.
Yes.
So a lot of parents didn't really appreciate school education. Going to a monastery was much more preferable. So
Respected.
in fact, my grandfather, maternal grandfather, he was head of the religious commission here, and when he came back to Bumdang, he didn't really like my mother sending all of us to school. He would have preferred us to become monks, because becoming a monk in the past was like receiving a scholarship to a great educational institution. So school education was not as much appreciated, and one of the difficulties that the school faced was getting the children to school. But then that thing changed slowly as the school graduates, the college graduates came and held important positions and got very generous, well, both power and money.
Yes.
So I remember my brother coming back after finishing school. He got trained in Samsi and then came back to my village as a teacher.
Yes.
And his first salary of 800 newtons was a huge amount for my grand uncle to see. I mean, he was against us going to schools because he cared more for the animals on the farm and all the fields we had. But then when my brother brought his first salary, he was so impressed.
Yes.
And I think that applied to almost all Bhutanese parents and grandparents in those days, that this new modern educated young people with a important position in government and then a good salary.
They have
suddenly
respect,
became,
they have salary,
exactly.
They have a livelihood.
And the sad part to that was around the same time that this perception of change happened. I became a monk. I went the other way.
Alas.
I was a very bright student who my teachers thought will be so successful. In fact, when I sat the class 5 common exams, a lot of my teachers expected me to be Bhutan proper.
Yes.
Class 8 exam, more or less the same. And they all thought I'll become a medical doctor. So when I left school and became a monk, they all got so let down and
so there was no
shocked.
pressure from your parents to be a monk. Actually, your mother wanted you to be.
They knew only after 2 months.
What was that drove you towards?
So I'll not discuss that yet, but coming back to the reason of why I went from being a monk to pursue Western education in the UK. So in the late 80s and early 90s, as the prestige of modern Western English medium education sort of grew, sadly there was a lot of disdain and contempt towards our own tradition.
Yes.
So I remember coming from India to Bhutan, and as a monk, a lot of people assume that you wouldn't know English and that you are illiterate, uneducated. I was young, I could take that, but even some of my teachers, very old, wise monastic leaders, they were looked down as well as ignorant, stupid, backward, traditionalist. So I've been to quite a few government offices where people really mistreated me. I remember walking into a cousin's house. The cousin who I knew was not there. There were other members. And as I walked in, they were about to have the meal. And normally in Bhutan, you say, come, welcome and share the meal, which they did. But then, as I sat down, this sister of my cousin, the other sister, other cousin who I didn't know, she didn't know me either. She was saying in English, what's he doing here? In English, with full assumption that I would know English because I was. And that kind of treatment, basically, both treatment that I experienced myself, and I was actually better because I could respond to them in English immediately. I remember walking along Northern Lam once with few monk friends, and there was a girl that shop still exists, but not the shopkeeper. There was a female shopkeeper. We were all cracking jokes among ourselves and laughing. And then she called her husband and said, these monks are laughing at me.
Yes.
And then I said, excuse me, we didn't laugh at you. We were laughing at our own jokes. And she was totally dumbfounded that this monk is speaking English. So in the 80s and 90s, that was the situation here in Bhutan. Everybody adored and admired modern Western education in English. And
the convent educated, the English medium schools from Darjeeling, Kalimpong, that was happening. Oh yes, yes.
So it hurt me to the extent that I thought I'm going to go and get a degree from a Western college and then come and address this issue. But fortunately, I didn't have to do any work. I say the Americans did work for me. It was a mission accomplished with no effort on my part, because then early 90s, the Dalai Lama became so famous in the West. And he became famous for reasons of being a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, mainly. People like Richard Gere, Bob Thurman, and many great names in America and the West followed him. And for them, the only place where Tibetan Buddhism was very well preserved in its pure form was Bhutan, because Tibet was lost. Sikkim and Nepal and Ladakh, they've all got diluted and so they came to Bhutan. And when people like Richard Gere or Bob Thurman came to Thimphu, I still remember reading in a newspaper, maybe you do as well, Chimi, because you must have been much younger then. They were asked to give talks. Now, obviously, the Western educated officials here, the modern educated youth here, felt, why is Richard Gere coming here? A Hollywood celebrity. Or Bob Thurman, the professor from Columbia University, showing interest in Bhutan. And then they discovered these people are interested in our own heritage, in our own culture and spiritual traditions. So more or less through influence from the West, our people also start to change their attitude to our own heritage. So by the time I finished at Oxford, there was only a lot of eagerness on the part of the educated Bhutanese to know more about Buddhism, to know more about the culture. And that's what we have today, no? Like how much you are interested in. A lot of very well-educated people here don't any longer think that our tradition is backward or superstitious or so forth. So that explains why I went to the West.
I will
Partly.
get back. I will get back because I'm really interested why you actually, without anybody pushing you to be a monk. I will get to that, but I remember on the note that you said how we have not forgotten, but there was this time and period where English speaking, it was more considered more prestigious.
Yes.
And then, and it happened very quickly. And then we are also byproducts of that.
Indeed, yes.
We are, our parents studied, and we were neither here nor there. And we still, I sincerely...
You talked about the cultural limbo I mentioned in the book.
More than that, this was when I was joining. I've been with Bhutan for very long, but when I was taking the position as the executive director, I came to Yola to seek guidance. I've come to you not many times, but the 3 times that I have, you've been able to advise me very practically and very clear. And when this book, The History of Bhutan, which you have written, you gave this to me, to Chimi and family, long overdue. I hope this will deepen your insight into Bhutan and strengthen you as a head of FAST. At that time,
I wrote that.
Yes, I'm sure, but this means a lot. And you wrote this, and my love for Vast was because of a man who showed kindness. And I was a young teenager whose father passed away, and we were suddenly brought to the capital. Very turbulent years. My mother was not from here. She didn't have a family. So you have all these issues going around. So I grew up neither having a strong base of family connections and traditions, and forget about born a Buddhist but not a Buddhist at the same time. Neither being able to speak, neither even having a village to go back to and call it your village. So, but then I found kindness because of Ajikarma and what he was doing. So the space was a safe space for us. So I didn't come. So over the years, then when Aja was saying that he needs help to run the place, and that was when I was doing my own things, but I only felt again. I think this is also karma, or I just felt the right. It's only right for me to say yes, although it was not the right time, because I was just starting my own business. I built my own hotel, but then I had been a recipient of someone's kindness, and I believe that Vast is a space where there are a lot of young people who are coming around, just like me. It was a safe space for me, and then he asks me to lead the organization. When I was thinking, in all honesty, that yes, it's a cool place, but that was how, on the inside, when I think about it, it was just embracing, because young people needed a safe space. There was this transition happening, like what you mentioned. These problems were there, but it could not be pinpointed. So he was just taking care out of his kindness, by default perhaps, but there was a will and there was kindness.
No, one of the things that has been happening in Bhutan, and it's true to almost all societies around the world. And you are again part of this change. Yeah, that human beings in general, unless you have transcended some basic human needs, in general, human beings are social animals. So when we were in our traditional setting, like in a village, you had the community support and all the social needs being fulfilled on that level, in that context. And then as Bhutan moved from that rural setting to have new urban settlements like Thimphu, it was a big shift for many people. And of course, you say you don't have a village to go to, but even those who have a village to go to because their parents have come from a specific village or grandparents have come from a specific village, or maybe they were even born in that village, even then, when they are moved to live in a new urban settlement for extended periods of time, there is a lot of sort of discontinuity and chaos and tension as a result. And one solution to build a more sociable community in an urban settlement is to form associations. Yes. And I think Ajay Karma has done an excellent job in forming this association of artists, to which you sort of could feel at home and belong.
We didn't come in as artists. It was a place where he and his friends were artists, used the medium as use the medium of art as a tool to, like,
socialize.
Okay, yes, socialize, come, and then without being dictative or anything, be able to guide, very gentle and subtle ways. But I used to think, oh, this is a cool thing. And then, although I'm as an adult also, and when I came in as the ED, and this book, when you gave it to me and you wrote, I hope this will deepen your insight into Bhutan and strengthen you as a head of WASP. I read many times now. And it's only now I understand.
Has it strengthened you? Maybe not a lot. I don't know how much contribution I made to you in strengthening.
So many other factors, but this is one thing that has helped me. We did study history of Bhutan, even this one, but deeply with a new lens, with a new viewpoint. And why is Lopen not telling me to, like, oh, I hope this will deepen your insight into Bhutan and strengthen you as head of... You didn't tell me, you didn't give me a long lecture or anything. You just allowed me to contemplate Mevala. And then I kept realizing, my God, we are so rich. Only now I'm 40 plus now, and then this is the time when I'm thinking, wow, I have been outside when I have had exposures. And then I'm thinking, oh, this is what he meant. We can only be strong, have this inner strength, because we have Bhutan. We are, when you mentioned early on that we're very fortunate to be born in Bhutan, actually, because of the rich traditions, because of it's the only live as a nation to have the teachings of the great Sakyamuni Buddha still flourishing, and of Guru Padmasambhava. And if you dive deep into it and contemplate on it, I think the West has are looking at us with such they are envying us, actually, and we are forgetting. And this is where I also worry. I think that's why these talks are important, so that the younger generation also know.
Yeah.
These are attempts.
Yeah, what you mentioned is true to some extent, but I do want to correct for some of our young people. I think when it comes to Buddhism, even when it comes to Vajrayana Buddhism, there are countries, there are communities that are doing as good as us, if not better. And at this time, I would say there are far more Tibetan authors, masters, and practitioners on Vajrayana Buddhism than we have, just because of the sheer size of the population they have. So on that front, I wouldn't say we are unique, but one thing we need to appreciate, and this is something that I share with non-Bhutanese who come to Bhutan, but I have not actually got an opportunity to share with Bhutanese audience. There are a few reasons why we are unique, or why we enjoy this greater richness of our artistic, cultural, and spiritual heritage. First is that today we always think of Bhutan as this landlocked country between the two Asian giants, India and China. This geopolitical location is what everybody keeps talking about. But if you look one step further, what our geographic location says is we are actually at the meeting point of two of Asia's greatest civilizations. So we have the Indian civilization from the south, and the Chinese and the Tibetan civilization to the north, which both meet here. We are at the meeting sort of point of these two, and that's why we have this complexity. When you look at architecture, you will see Chinese elements sitting right next to the Indian elements. You look at art, you will see the same. The peony flowers we see on a wall painting is not coming from India, it's coming from China. But then the lotus flowers comes from India. So we are at the meeting point of two of Asia's, probably the world's greatest civilizations.
And perhaps the oldest also, more.
Well, there are other Egyptian or Harappan, Manjudara, and so forth, other civilizations that claim to be older, so I wouldn't say the oldest, but definitely in memorable history, let's say in the last two millennia, the Chinese and the Indian, particularly in the first millennia, these two are the two greatest civilizations one can think of in this part of the world. Europe in those days, North America in those days didn't really have a great civilization. Africa didn't either being at that time. So anyway, that's one reason why we have a very complex, very rich, dense cultural heritage. The second reason is, you look south to India, their culture has been disrupted by the Islamic invasions 1,000 years ago, and then by the British colonization 500 years ago, and then a very, very fast haphazard modernization. And you look up north, again, China had, and Tibet had the communist occupation, then the tragic cultural revolution, which more or less wiped out all the old cultural systems. So while these two big civilizations met in Bhutan, they have lost in their own lands. Whereas here, because of our geographic location, we have retained our cultures with no disruption whatsoever. There was no colonization, no big social unrest, no natural calamities. The cultural continuity in Bhutan is almost unparalleled. So these reasons, of course, makes our culture much more unique and special. And I think there's a lot we can sort of appreciate and share with the rest of the world.
So now coming to, I remember that you're a traditionalist, but you've never, although you are a traditionalist, and when you have come to VAST or interacted with VAST people, young people also, and you have never been somebody who said, oh, this is out of traditional bounds. You have understood something about, you have appreciation or understanding, or maybe you'll be able to dive in further in this, but you never made us feel uncomfortable. Because a lot of people, when they used to look at VAST Bhutan as the contemporary art center, it's the only one so far. And there were a lot of traditional people saying, you're going out of our tradition. And that is to really, as if we are not Bhutanese. But you never made us feel, although we know that you're a very, there's tradition.
And what I generally believe in is that there's no absolute truth or reality. And this is a Buddhist position. Everything is relative.
Yes.
So even when you say tradition, what is really tradition? Something that has gone on for an extended period of time. If you look back into our history, before Buddhism came in, we had the animistic, shamanistic culture. Do we say that that's our original tradition and continue practicing that? There's a lot of animal sacrifice involved in such things. Do we continue that practice? So we need to sometimes also know that tradition is what we make of it, how we sort of adapt to situations and time as things change. And I think even with regard to art, you could say what existed before 1960 is tradition, because modernization didn't quite come to Bhutan in a big way until then. But then again, in the pre-1960 world of Bhutan, you will have pre-Shabdrung and post-Shabdrung. So which do we really stick to as the real tradition? There's no real tradition. It's something that just keeps evolving and changing. And I think we have actually lots of invented traditions. In my own lifetime, I mean, more than half of the color of scarves didn't exist 50 years ago. And we've invented these traditions. So same should apply to art.
Yes.
If there was wall painting with strict symmetry and mensuration in the past, that was the tradition then. But this more fluid contemporary art would also soon become a tradition, depending on how people appreciate it, how people accept it. So I think it's wrong to think there is a fixed tradition, a static tradition.
So your only concern has been when tradition is when a transition happens too quickly, there is a social disorder.
Exactly. So you go with what is accepted. You have to really think of whether there is some aesthetics in it, one, whether there is efficacy in something, and both with aesthetics and efficacy, you have to really see whether the existing society, the context appreciates it. If it is outrageous in that society, it could be the best piece of art somewhere else, but it shouldn't be considered as tradition or as a norm in that particular context, I suppose. So now talking about art, as we are here in an art studio, I think what is accepted as good art would become slowly the traditional art after sort of repetition and
because what was traditional art then was contemporary.
Exactly. A lot of things keep changing through centuries. So one should appreciate creativity and innovation to that extent. But then one has to also be, the innovators and the creators have to be also socially responsible, not to be too sort of disruptive or too outrageous. Maybe disrupt in a positive way to break through our herd mentality, through sort of.
But that is an artist, actually that artist's job to, it's not an, artists actually do not have a job, it's even not a responsibility, but it is, the artist is somebody, from my perspective, is somebody who is actually deeply looking at yourself first, looking within, and you are observing, you're soaking in, feeling, and then you're expressing, and it's up to the society how. And because you're observing deeply, feeling that sense and sensibility, you're at your heightened abilities, and then you just create. And when you're creating with that kind of, and not because you want a livelihood, not because you want some kind of fame or a label, but because of that. That is when you see things, the society gets a bit startled. So, of course, this is where I think VAST has been trying to nurture that innate abilities of people. All of us are artists. Not just a professional artist is an artist. So even with this, the traditional art is a technique, but you can use that technique to be able to express the now.
Yes, of course, yes. I personally see art as an expression of one's inner feelings, emotions, thoughts, a projection of the inner world. And I think what the artists do with a paint and brush is one way to express it, but then we also have other people expressing it through clay and hands, or stone and chisel, or paper and pen, music, dance, and I think architecture. There are so many ways to express, and when something is expressed effectively, of course, some people express inner beauty But then sometimes you may also have people expressing the inner ugliness.
Yes.
I think a lot of people also have traumas inside which they then project in
Yes.
as piece of art. So in the latter case, when they especially project their inner traumas and inner sort of disturbances, it also becomes difficult for the consumers, to the viewers. Whereas if you are only mostly expressing the inner beauty and inner harmony, art becomes very attractive and appealing and soothing for the viewer. But I think when artists are expressing slightly more chaotic, disturbing inner world in forms of art, I can see how sometimes people don't necessarily appreciate that.
Yes.
But again, you have to see that if the art piece is in sync with what is the inner experience, there is
That's
beauty.
been true,
Yeah,
no lie.
yeah.
So that's been true. I'm going to come back. I'm going to. I wanted to ask you about when you were going to talk about this feelings and how when you have some of these triggers in our life comes through pain and insecurities or some kind of which you expressed yourself that your drive to learn English and go although the conditions was not so troublesome for you, but you had that drive and it came from this nuanced moments in your life. It doesn't even, right now when you look at it, it may look small, but it was a significant moment which changed you. And so, but you've been able to, this is where I'm getting at, all of us go through good and bad.
Yes.
Different kinds of
Yes.
emotions. But people, this is where life as art is. You've been able to channel that kind of emotion, negative emotion actually, but you've been able to channel it.
Yeah. No, I suppose you say life is a canvas or life is an art. I think that's a very good broader view of art, instead of reducing art to what is done on a physical canvas or with clay or wood or whatever.
Yes,
I think we need to really think of the bigger sort of process of evolution.
Yes.
And so on an individual level, your life is your piece of art. You're trying to mold it in the best way. So you try to suppress the negative or uproot the negative at the best, promote and bring out the positive sides, become a better human being, become a more intelligent, more articulate, more sort of attractive. In whatever way, we try hard to get better. And I think sometimes we, just like as in painting, when you may have a mistaken sort of splash of color, right, which you rectify immediately. Life is always also full of mistakes. We just have to, as fast as possible, rectify that and make it more harmonious, more progressive, positive. So, in the Buddhist context, you talk about art in three ways. Often, the term art is not found in the Buddhist vocabulary,
Yes.
or in Chike or Sanskrit. It can be roughly translated with zo sometimes or rikzen. But in the classical Buddhist Himalayan taxonomy of sciences to learn, you have the 5 major sciences, 5 minor sciences, and among the 5 major sciences, you have art and craft put together. And there you talk about 3 forms of art: the physical art, the verbal art, and the mental art. So, beginning with your own bodily behavior and comportment, you are supposed to refine it and make it appealing and attractive and positive. The same also with words. And more importantly, especially in the case of Buddhism, art is more about the transformation of the inner state of the mind, how you refine it and make it more positive, attractive, efficacious. And so art is presented in a much bigger context, of including your whole life, the process of living and evolution.
So this is where I've been Yeah, it took me a long time. It's just not a beautiful canvas on the wall. It's about whatever you are, whether you're writing, whether you're even filming, or listening to a sound, cooking, anything. But if you're doing it with observation, feeling, there is this whole body, mind, and the whole thing coming together.
Breathing. Breathing is a very important art.
How at that point of time, when no one was forcing you and everybody was going towards the modern education system, and in fact your mother was supportive about you going to the new way of education, but you somehow, the karmic winds took you to monastic education still.
My parents, like most parents in those days, were very traditional in that they had a very devout Buddhist worldview. So they would have appreciated their children to become monks and nuns, spirituality being one of the most important values and objectives in life. But then the government was doing a lot of great work in promoting modern education. So we ended up in modern schools. And I, for no specific reason, came to Thimphu and found myself a place in Yangchenpo High School. And as a young boy, 16-year-old from a fairly remote village from Bumdam, starting life here in Thimphu, it was quite challenging. One, I still remember there was a great deal of bullying in the school, especially by children of well-off Thimphu elites. And then I was also so much interested in biology, wanting to become a medical doctor. And everyone had high hopes of me becoming a medical doctor. But somehow the biology teacher at that time and I didn't get along very well. And that sort of made me lose interest in my subject, in which I actually was quite good. I was always scoring above 90. But then those are small, I think, minor reasons. I think the primary reason would be my karmic sort of past. Something drove me to come to Thimphu and then to leave school and become a monk. But the other very important condition for it is in 1986, His Majesty the Fourth King decided that there should be modern educated monks.
Yes.
So he opened up an avenue. He and the 68th Jikempo, late Jikempo Tenzin Dendrup, they started an avenue for young school-educated Bhutanese kids to become monks. So some of my friends left school to become monks, I think sometime in April or so. And one of my best friends also joined that group. And that kept me thinking, you know? And there was, of course, also persuasion for me to join the group. And I didn't immediately take that up. I spent almost a month pondering on it and then eventually gave in. So that's how I became a monk.
Okay.
Partly because of karmic force, but because His Majesty the Fourth King and the 60th Jikempo had this vision to have modern educated monks, and part because of my disillusionment with the high school in Thimphu.
So many conditions.
Yes.
So many conditions come in Memola. Some things you have in control, some you don't.
Yes.
Some at point of your life you think certain things which becomes an obstacle is actually, when you look back, it was not. Do you have no regrets of wherever?
No, well, at one point I had a regret because I felt the medical profession is such a noble profession which can bring immediate benefit to the society. So after about 5 years or so, I almost came back as a monk to pursue an MBBS.
Yes.
But it was quite challenging for me to then go back to science and upgrade my knowledge of science to get an admission into a medical school. So I in the end gave up. But apart from that period, I didn't have really any regret of having left school and become a monk. But there was one short phase when I was regretful.
You're very, very driven person.
Yeah,
Very driven. But
on that
your
point,
drive.
On that point, I want to add. So when I had the regret of not becoming a doctor myself,
Yes.
and many years later, when I started Loden, and we started the scholarship program, I decided that to make up for my own failures in becoming a medical doctor, that I will do something to help others become medical doctors. So I've been raising funds for medical studies scholarship. And to this day, I think we have funded about 27 MBBS candidates and many nurses and pharmacists and psychotherapists and so forth. So at least about 40 health caregivers through the scholarship to make up for my own failure in becoming a medical person.
This is where, like, you had that drive, but sometimes your conditions take you somewhere else in Guatemala. But you've also still, how much ever we call it destiny by fate or and there is also destiny by choice, and these two things come together and you've been very driven. But your drive, did it shape you when you wanted to? Is it to prove to yourself or prove to society that you wanted to live a purposeful life?
I don't think there's need for proof, actually. You know, as I said earlier, we are by nature social animals, unless you transcend some of these basic human instincts and needs. So if you're like Milarepa, living up in a cave all by yourself, you somehow transcend some of these social inclinations. But in general, we have these social inclinations and needs which we must fulfill. So to be a whole person, to be a person with fulfillment and meaning in life, you need to have not only the pursuit of your own success and your own sort of ambitions, but also to do something that makes you a whole person. And I think helping others, being part of the society, adding value to society comes as part of that. So there's no sort of deliberate, concerted effort to prove to oneself or prove to others. But I think there is that longing to be a full person. And a full person would be somebody who has fulfilled the emotional, social, spiritual needs. Of course, the economic need as well.
So many, Mullah, so many to factor in. And then when I look at your the number of works, whether it is as an academician or as a scholar, it's like overwhelming. And you almost seem like somebody who you do not want to waste your human life at your birth at all.
No, I don't know if you can put it that way. I mean, it's nice that you put it that way, but sometimes, and some people see my weakness is being too sort of workaholic, let's say. I don't use that term much, but somehow I've been made to think. And I think this again comes as a result of my upbringing. Traditional Bhutan is actually filled with this culture of productivity. You know, people are always engaged to do something, to add value, to be contributing to one's life or to societal welfare. So I also have that tendency to always be productive, and I certainly work hard. Even at this age, I think I spend 14-15 hours doing work. which is not necessarily a positive thing. You need to also sometimes take time for yourself.
Yes.
But I have got into this habit of measuring success in life through the productivity yardstick.
Yes.
And so if I don't become productive, and you can be productive either writing an article or speaking to people or doing a piece of art or doing gardening or cooking some food, but if you don't become productive, somehow I feel like I've wasted my time. Life seems sort of incomplete without having achieved the minimum productivity that you expect or you aim for. So that's both a blessing and a bane. Because it's a blessing, it makes your life very rich and very useful, but it's also a bane because you're going through your, putting yourself through a lot of torture and hard work when everybody else around you may be having fun. You get deep into your head that you have to be productive all the time. And I think for a society that celebrates happiness, maybe you should also distance oneself from such strong pursuit of productivity.
So when you say a society which pursues happiness, more than that, I understand that you've written so deeply and understand Buddhism so well, but you're also a practitioner, and in that practice, you have to pause in to be. And everything else is, what is the point that you do contemplate on what is the point if everything is illusionary and what is really real? And why do we go on a grind like this? Because you seem to be somebody who really driven, and not for yourself, but to fulfill something as a social being. That fulfilling desire is there to fulfill. But at the same time, you have on one side where you, as a Buddhist practitioner, on this really, really deep level of being able to pause and just look. Where are you at this time?
Yeah, I'm in that pausing phase at the moment. For the past few years, I've been more into spirituality, meditation, contemplation, much more than active social work or academic work. And I still do write, I teach, I study and read a lot, but then I'm focusing more and more on the contemplative side of life. And again, this is something that I acquired through my upbringing and education. When you plan your life in a traditional Buddhist system, the early part of your life, you live your worldly life, you do your education, you pursue your sort of career, and so the first half of the life has to be dedicated towards more for lively, active engagements. And then as you age, I think it's important also to sort of calm down and build that inner composure, get deeper into contemplation and prayers.
But what if it comes much more ahead? That feeling,
wonderful.
That genuine, that heart of sadness.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful if it's a genuine culture of mindfulness, contemplation, and internal reflection. But a lot of the people, especially when they are given the freedom and the liberty to express, sometimes people express these things too early as a form of escapism. You face a challenge and you think, okay, I'm going to give up this and become a hermit. But you'll more or less fade as a hermit as well, because it's not easy to be a hermit.
Yes, to sit still.
In fact, it will be even more difficult. So if it was more as a sign of weakness, I would say it's wrong to start early. But then we are all different. Some people may be able to and more inclined to start very early on, whereas others like myself would probably postpone it and do it later in life. But one thing I want to point out again is you mentioned earlier this fine balance between productivity and also taking life easily. Right? And I think it's important. What I try to tell myself a lot is, if you are being too driven just for your own sake, then you're basically being driven by a very selfish, narrow, egocentric agenda, and that's wrong. And that's what is called greed in the spiritual literature. So something that's driven by personal greed, we should curb and try to control. But if it is driven by sheer altruism and compassion to make the world a better place, then there shouldn't be any limit. You should be as productive, as hardworking, as diligent. You should have that drive to contribute as much as possible. And of course, not everybody is able to do that because we all face exhaustion and fatigue after a while. But
and also your close relationships, and there is a sacrifice on.
There is a lot of sacrifice. But one thing I want to point out is, this false premise being presented, especially from people who have failed in life, saying, "Oh, I work hard. Why be successful? It's all like a dream. It's all illusory." Now, of course, it's true. Things are impermanent, illusory. But even as an illusion, we feel the pain. Even as in like a dream, people go through nightmares. People have suffering. Right? The illusory suffering is felt as painfully as if this suffering is real. So it is actually it behoves a bodhisattva character or somebody who is who contributes to society to help eliminate the illusory suffering. It is illusory, no doubt, but if people experience it in an illusory manner, it's better to get rid of that illusory experience of suffering and promote and foster more experience of happiness. So I think it's important as Buddhists to always remind oneself that while things are interdependent, illusory, dreamlike, that doesn't imply that we should be engaged in social development. We should be engaged in spiritual development. We should put our share. We should
in the relative
as well. Exactly. We should contribute to social well-being.
But with very mindfully for whatever our drive is, where it is coming from, and it has to come with this understanding that we're all interdependent and we have a role in a part to play.
Yes. I mean, for instance, our attitude towards wealth and money. A lot of people would shun desire for wealth and money. But we all know that people suffer in poverty. It's important that we have wealth, that we have good income, that we have good living standards. The important part is really to pursue wealth and good living standards, but without too much fixation on it. Because the more fixation and attachment you have to it, you will probably suffer even with that new wealth you obtain. So like holding a coin in the hand, you could really clench it, which will cause a lot of stress and tension having that, or you could just very calmly have it in open palm. The value of the coin is the same. You have the coin with such comfort and ease and enjoy it, or you keep it with such stress and tension. I think it's important that we accumulate wealth, we build wealth, we improve people's living standards, but with ease and not a very strong attachment or fixation on things. So that is the fine line that we need to have as a Mahayana Buddhist country. We should keep promoting and developing the society, but not with too intense and fixated approach as if things are sort of real and absolute.
Yes. This is where I have seen, even in the whole transition, and we're still going through that struggles. We are a Buddhist country, Mola, and then we are also moving equally, trying to in the economic and financial and the social development with the other countries, and there is such a challenge. Dharma is almost looked at that in the worldly ways you'll not be if you pursue the worldly ways, your spiritual development is you will lack in that. So there has been, especially for the younger generation, it becomes such a complex message. How do do you still pursue without really having to renounce it, but pursue and
So-
not disregard?
Again, this is really the art of life. Right? It's really learning the fine art of life, that you understand things well to begin with. And there's a lot of poverty of understanding of our spiritual heritage, our sort of human existence. So in most cases, we outsource spirituality to someone. No, I've been quite vocal about it. For instance, I rarely hire priests to do rituals for me,
Yes.
either for longevity or for good health or making wealth. You take up the prayer and do it yourself with sincerity, with dedication, with honesty. So, as the Buddha has said, you can only seek your liberation yourself. No one else can come and wash away your sins or remove your pains with a powerful hand. Or in Bhutan, we have this tradition of flocking to a lama and always wanting to be touched by the lama. A lama can't remove your pains with his hands. Similarly, you can't have somebody's enlightenment and composure and compassion sort of
Transfer to you.
transport it onto another person. So with that view, which is what the Buddha always taught, we have to develop ourselves. We have to really first understand human existence and our own state of the mind, spiritual practices, and then be able to integrate these in our daily life. I think allocating spirituality to some group of people or to a specific period of your time and life is wrong. Spirituality should be actually informing.
It's a very personal journey also.
Yes, it should be informing all aspects of your life. That's what ethical, more holistic life is about. So the trend we have of having a rimdo in the office as just one day event, a spiritual cultural event, and the rest of the day living with no ethics or culture is wrong. I think a lot of businesses function like that. They will do everything unethical for the whole year and then dedicate 10% or 20% of the funds of the profit, do a ritual somewhere in the temple or build a temple or put gold on the turrets of a temple. But that is really a malpractice of Buddha's spirituality, at least. So it's important that we understand the spiritual practices well enough to integrate it in our daily life and make it part and parcel of our daily living. That is the true art of living.
Yes. And with that, is there anything that you like to add that we have missed out? Something that has shaped or been a turning point in your life, or something that you like to on this theme, life as art. Of course, we can go on with the conversation. It's you are a wealth of knowledge and experience. I would not want to let you go, but we have to, somewhere something has to end. And now, if you could give your pearls of wisdom of you as a living.
I don't think I have pearls of wisdom, but I can share how I learn. My own life, I always see as a kind of a process of art, you could say. Always trying to refine it, make it more beautiful, make it more useful. And unlike the fine arts or other forms of art we do on canvas or with clay and so forth, the art of life, we have to not only think of making it attractive, aesthetically beautiful, but also very efficacious and relevant and useful for society. So it's a constant process of learning and evolution, always trying to steer in the right direction, mold yourself. And things don't happen overnight. You need to have a vision, and then you need to work towards that vision, measure your journey in years, in months, in weeks, in days, set targets for each day. So it's just like
set
an
targets
artist.
for each day.
I think so.
You have a routine?
have to set an arcade. I try to have a routine, and it helps when your office or organization you work for sets also a target for you. So basically, it's not something that will happen magically, quickly overnight or
It's the
with no effort.
incremental consistency.
Exactly. So one of the things that
Incremental
people need to learn, especially these days, is persistence and endurance.
Yes.
People are not patient enough. Thanks to the influence of smartphones, we all have this very short span of attention. People want instant gratification. So there's so much impatience and lack of resilience to endure and work for things. And I think it's important in our times to develop that inner courage and resilience to endure and be patient and pursue something very gradually. And only then it becomes more fulfilling and meaningful. So life as a kind of art, you are basically designing your own life. And it will have many facets. I mean, for instance, in terms of education, I say there are 3 Buddhist phases associated with the 3 types of wisdom. We say Töbe Sherab, wisdom from study, Sambe Sherab, wisdom from reflection, Kombe Sherab, wisdom from cultivation and practice. Earlier part of your life, you need to study, you need to read and listen and explore and develop that inner sort of critical thinking, inner power to discern things. And again, when we say critical thinking in Bhutan, we have this misunderstanding that
it's a negative word.
It's a
but
criticism
it's more,
of somebody else. No, but it's not that. It's really being able to distinguish right from wrong, good from bad, poor from less poor, and so forth. It's just the faculty to be able to tell things.
Quality, the
Exactly.
discerning quality.
So you develop that initially by reading, writing, speaking, listening, and so forth. And then you need to sort of regurgitate these ideas, reflect a lot over them. And you'll probably find the best that suits you if you keep thinking over and over again and contemplating. And finally, you have to cultivate, apply them in practice. So I often believe the purpose of my life, the goal of my life is the cultivation of 3 kinds of wisdoms. Now, when we say wisdom, again, it's not to say that we're only talking about the cognitive aspect. Now, we need to bring in the moral, the ethical, the emotional aspect of our being as well. So it's a holistic approach to make life richer, purer, more positive, more useful, and so forth. And one of the things I've learned is, as we create this life to make it more beautiful, there are a lot of examples around us we can look up to, not only human beings. Since COVID, one of the best inspirations I find is from nature. You do gardening, you walk. You look at a flower or a leaf. Non-human intelligence is so far ahead of human intelligence. I know Vas is fantastic artist, but I don't think the vast artists would be still able to create a flower with not only the texture and structure, but this fragrance. There's so much that nature creates automatically, that intelligence that exists in nature. And we can learn a lot from nature on how we can keep improving to make things more aesthetically beautiful, more useful, more harmonious. And I think on that point, true art, I think, is what aligns with reality, what aligns with how things are. So if you do an art, let's say a vast artist does a piece of art on canvas, which is supposed to reflect his or her own emotions, when that truly, authentically projects and represents his or her emotions, we say this is fantastic art, right? In the same way, I think beyond the work on canvas or with clay or whatever, we need to think about how our physical behavior, verbal speech, mental thoughts, how we live our life, the landscapes you make around your house, the way you structure your room, your kitchen, how you put ingredients into a dish you are cooking. It has to be so aligned to each other to be in the best alignment of the way things are.
Synchronized.
Nice, yes, exactly. So that's the word. So if you synchronize the ingredients so well in a dish, the dish will taste so wonderful. If you synchronize and get the right energy flows in a room, with interior design, you get this fantastic feeling, the vibes that you get. What often people say feng shui. You have these energies that you need to play with. And I think in life, the most important is to really synchronize and align yourself to the way things are. And the ultimate form of alignment is being at ease,
Yes.
with no distortion, with no contortion, with no tension or stress. And that's the highest form of art of living that Bhutan's own spiritual heritage teaches. The Chakchen tradition in the Kagyu, the Dzogchen tradition in Nyingma will tell you about how to live life
effortlessly,
in a natural
ease.
Yeah, at ease. So with no effort, with no contrivance, to be basically at ease with reality, the way things are, to breathe, to relax in that state of total sort of quiet openness.
Openness at the
So
end.
I think that's the highest form of art.
Yes. And we hope with your name as being Phuntsho, as being auspicious, we all will make aspiration that all of us will be able to touch base with ourselves and be at ease and be able to do things not only for self, but for aspire to do for many, many, just not human beings, but for all sentient beings.
That's so.